Welcome to the Texas Values Report. This is Jonathan Saenz, president of Texas Values. Great to be with you on another glorious week in the state of Texas. We're less than a week away for early voting in the primary elections in the state of Texas. So if you haven't noticed that yet, there's still time for you to get some good information to learn about these things. If you're new to the show, we talk about the issues of faith, family, and freedom in the arenas of the courts, the legislature, and the media. And we've been running now for, I think, 6 years, over 300 consecutive episodes. So excited about it. So you can find us on podcast. You might be watching this live on Facebook. And so iTunes, SoundCloud, a lot of good stuff out there. Go to our website to see the different platforms that we use. And every week we try to bring a guest and keep things current. There's usually like way too much to talk about, all right? That I don't get to everything. And today may be one of those days because we have a great guest today and a friend of Texas Values, somebody I've got to work with and work alongside for many years in different, arenas, if you will, as part of my intro. But I want to get right to that because I'm excited about it and a lot of breaking news, though. So stay tuned. I'll have some updates on election issues and so on. But Konni Burton is going to be our guest today on the Texas Values Report. She is the founder and CEO of The Texan. This is a statewide news entity that has a lot of focus on issues of political nature. But, she did some work before that you might be aware of. She served in the Texas Senate from 2015 through 2019 and sort of famously took the seat or, won the seat after Wendy Davis, the liberal Democrat senator who we know was a very big abortion proponent and made a name for herself in the Senate and is now making a name for herself leading a wonderful entity, the Texan. So, Konni, I want to say senator. It's going to be hard, okay? Welcome to the Texas Values Report.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being on. Thank you.
Well, and that's just sort of me. I'm a formal kind of guy, and I like to respect titles and all that kind of stuff, but it's been a few years since you've been in the Senate, and you've been busy with some great work, and I appreciate that. And I enjoy when I do get to see you. We were joking before we came on the air. You're, always a pleasant demeanor and a great smile and a great laugh and a lot of energy, and look, we don't always see that these days. I'm in a lot of political settings and environments and events, and sometimes there's reason to be concerned or upset or worried or distressed. But we do. We have to laugh at times. And we've got to be ourselves. This is naturally who you are. But I feed off of that because I try to have a upbeat demeanor and bring a smile and presence, in a time period, in a climate that leaves a lot of people with things to worry about. So I appreciate that. I want to spend a good chunk of time talking about the Texan and some issues going on related to what you guys are writing on there. But take us back for a second. 2019, you started the Texan. I would imagine not, news sources were sort of going down. People were getting cut. You're still seeing that. Tell us a little bit about this entity and why it was important for you to get it started.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Obviously I was an activist before I decided to run for the state Senate seat. So I've seen politics from an activist level. I've seen politics from from the Texas Ledge perspective. And not only that, I've seen media from those perspectives. So I was one of those that rose up during the Tea Party movement. And, even though the prevailing wisdom, or I should say not wisdom, because it wasn't wisdom, the narrative was that these people in the Tea Party movement were, racist, blah, blah, blah. I was just somebody who had, and many of us, most all of us were just people who had voted Republican all our lives. But all of a sudden started seeing when we had, at least at the national level, all three, the presidency and Congress, that we were still growing government. And it didn't rise up with Obama. It actually rose up before Obama took the presidency. And so, I saw how the narratives were pushed in media when I was an activist. Then when I was a candidate, I saw the narratives from the media. And then when I was an elected official, I saw the narratives from the media. And so it was very frustrating to myself and my husband, as it is for so many citizens in the country and particularly Texas. And we had always wondered why nobody is stepping into this arena that just does what media is supposed to do.
Yeah.
And that is report the facts and allow those who are reading the information to develop their own opinions. And so I unfortunately lost the Senate seat the year of the Beto election. And, while it is absolutely my loss, the media that year was even more outrageous, if you can even imagine that. It was Trump on the ballot. It was Beto on the ballot. It was this perfect storm of hatred and narratives. And it was an election cycle that took Texas. We really took a hit. And so after that election cycle, my husband looked at me and said, you know what? If nobody else is doing this, which clearly nobody else is, because it's been many years now, we need to do this. We need to step into the media market, particularly in Texas, who is a majority right of center state.
Yeah.
And yet all the media that we have in Texas is decidedly left of center politically.
At
And
least, if not further, right?
exactly.
We're talking with Konni Burton, former state senator from the Tarrant County area, now runs the Texan, started this entity, an online news source. They got a lot of other things they do, not just sort of your core stories. And before we continue the conversation, though, I'm going to do this. If you're watching on Facebook, share this feed, this video, put it into some groups and some chats. Let's get more people involved or exposed to the conversation. So, look, I remember that election cycle, and, there was some statewide people that almost lost that were Republican. There was some very thin margins. And I also remember, speaking of the Tea Party, I spoke at a Tea Party event at the state capitol. It was I think it was on tax day in April, and I was doing some work at the Capitol. I was inside like the entire day almost. And so they said, oh, come around lunch. And so I walk outside, and there's like 5,000 people on the south steps. And I was like, wow, what a showing. And I went out there and I gave a little speech and, just really enjoyed it. But, that was a really important time period. And look, I mean, we're now, 10, 12 years from that, and there's still some of those same concerns. And the reporting's been a big part of it. I really enjoyed your news source because I've been in the Austin area since 2008, okay? And our office is across the street from the Capitol. Some of those news entities are in some of the buildings that we've been in that, and I try to be friendly and professional about it, but it's hard to not see some of that and just know that it has an impact. That's one of the reasons why we do this show every week in podcast, just to have a little bit of time where we can get our message out there. But, you jumped into, an area in a field that could be easy to sort of get eaten up and, chewed up and spit out, and even from a business perspective. And so, but it looks like you guys have figured something out and you're doing pretty well and people are appreciating that. Tell us how your business model works for the Texan.
Right. So, we do have one of the hardest business models to be successful at, I will tell you, and we knew that going into it, but we did a lot of research. And, as you mentioned, media organizations are not doing well. They're laying off, their employees are forming unions. It's not good in the media market. So what we decided is my husband and I started this organization. We fund this organization. We are the backers of it. And no one else is. Now, with that, we are a subscription-based news outlet. So what the plan is, and the direction that we're going is, while we're funding it to get it up and off the ground and to be successful, we are hoping, and we're being very successful at getting subscriptions that will one day completely take over. And so it's the subscriptions that will drive this organization and that will allow us to grow even more into more local communities, which is really our goal. because so many, when I travel throughout the state of Texas, not only do we report on the Texas Ledge, which is so important, but we report as much as we can at the local level.
Yeah.
But we're still a young organization, and we certainly can't get all over Texas. And so the more subscribers we have, the more that we can get locally for these people who don't have any local newspapers anymore.
Yep.
And so that's our goal.
So on Twitter, or X, I guess, at TheTexan.news, the website is TheTexan.news. If you want to check out some great articles, some great reporting, let's talk about that team, okay? So on average, or, how many people are out there? I seem like I run into some new names quite frequently, covering a lot of stories. How many folks you got out there that are chasing stories down and doing some of that great work?
So it's interesting because everybody says, "Oh,
Depends
my
on what
gosh,
day."
We have like 10 of us.
Yeah.
There are 10 of us at the Texan. So, but it's just so amazing because we put out as much content, if not more, at different times than the Texas Tribune, which is an Austin-based political news organization. And I don't know.
That's on my bingo card, by the way. We'll get back to that.
Okay, good. But they are a much larger organization than us. So I always claim that our team is a lean, mean fighting machine, and they are just out there. They're getting the stories. We have an editor and a senior editor and an assistant editor in Austin, as well as Brad Johnson and Rob Lauschus and Cameron Abrams and Matt Stringer. We have Holly Hansen, who is in the Harris County area, and reporting on all things Harris County, which you can, oh my gosh, it's just, I say that every time where I go to speak, is like, oh my gosh, if you think Travis County is messed up, you should read Holly's articles on Harris County. Then we have Kim Roberts, who is up in North Texas. We also have Seth Moorhead, who is also in North Texas. And so they're just doing a fantastic job. And I'm just so proud of them. They're just putting out the information that people want. Like I said, we can't get to everything, and people come to all of us all the time with more stories. And that goes to show how much they trust us and know that we'll just report the story. So that says a lot, that we are getting the stories that, when we first launched, maybe we weren't. But we can't get to everything. And that's the unfortunate part of it. There's just so much out there to report on. So, of course, again, the more subscribers we get, the more we can grow, the more we can get into the more local areas and report on so many stories that are not getting reported on.
No, and look, I have, been running a business, if you will, our nonprofit organization, since 2012. And, it's, the state has a lot to cover, and we are a statewide organization, because we'll go wherever we need to go, but, 254 counties,
That's right.
1,200 school districts, over 1,500 cities, but having that goal, or knowing, you're in some of the bigger markets, and allows you to cover a lot of space from that, where a lot of people are in the rural areas, they're getting their, news, but now it's online. It's a different dynamic. But you mentioned the Texas Tribune. They didn't even exist really when I started in this work. They haven't been around a long time, but very quickly, added a lot of people, and, seem to have a huge influence. And let me back up for a second. I want to mention too, as it relates to the Texan, not that I would expect anything different, but the professionalism of your team has been so important, right? Because in these days, everybody's sort of a blogger, right? And who knows what's the truth. And so having someone who's really sort of involved in, I guess, what used to be called hard news, right? Trying to really report the information, but also being sensitive to the fact that there shouldn't be some spin or some, liberal bent on it, sort of maybe trying to counter that, but really, doing work as reporters. And I'm going to mention one in particular in just a minute, but the Tribune, they've had their issues. They're kind of the big dog, and it seems like, they've lost a few people, and, who knows what's going on there. I try to get along with some of those people, but I don't always agree with the way they report, but, they're out there. And so here comes the Texan though, right? And I think, whether you want to consider yourself rivaling or whatever, I do think you're offering an alternative to them that people are looking for.
I totally agree. And I think most people probably suspected, because I am a conservative Republican, they probably suspected that we would come out guns a-blazing and doing the opposite.
You
Sorry
would
about that.
never be like though that when you'd never come out guns blazing. Why would they think that about you? No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's true, because I am like that on a personal level, right? And that's fine. But that's not what the media should be.
Yeah.
The media should not be that. And while we have many organizations and people out there who claim that they are, I don't even know if they claim they're unbiased, but they try to get the information out, but they have an agenda. And it's to promote something or someone. And so, they either don't report something or they report it in a special light. That's not what the Texan is at all. What I want is for us, that not everybody read a story about, if you're pregnant, a pregnancy being called, or excuse me, abortion being called reproductive health care.
No, that is such
not reproductive health care.
Just those kind of things, just wording things accurately, right? Using the word they sometimes, like for transgender people, and you're reading an article and you're like, I don't even understand, what's being talked about here. And I think, many of us feel that way. When you see some of that other language being used, you feel like the reporting entity is sort of playing in to that liberal narrative or whatever. And so they've, instead of just, a black and white article, if you will, and something simple, they're sort of perpetuating that by using some of this language, not wanting to call a baby in the womb a baby, or, say that they had a heartbeat. I remember there was an article, they were gotten to all this discussion about trying to prove to people that, that sound that you hear when you have an ultrasound, it's not really a heart. And we're like, I mean, the bending over backwards is just, anyway, don't get me started on that. But that point alone is important.
That's that's what I mean by that is we just want the language to be to explain what is going on. That when you have a story and you talk about reproductive health care for women and you're including abortion, or you're really talking about abortion, well, that's actually, abortion is an activist language. Reproductive health care for abortion is activist language. And it confuses people, particularly. Think about what I always say when I'm speaking about what we do. I'm in different areas and I'll say, particularly those who are new to politics, and particularly females, if they're hearing, Republicans are against reproductive health care, well, that paints a very different picture for that young woman than it does, that they are targeting abortion, for instance. So we're not trying to, again, we're not the ones using activist language. We're the ones using the proper language so that people understand the issue at hand, so that then they can make their decision and then they can argue on the actual facts in front of them.
Well, I always chuckle and if not get irritated when I'll see the so-called, like the liberal media will write something like the so-called, they did that a lot with the Texas heartbeat law, the so-called Texas heartbeat law. We're like, that's what it's called. What do you mean the so-called? I mean, I think it's even in the statute that way. It's like, I mean, and it's just and at least they're saying Texas heartbeat. So I'm trying to okay, we kind of had a half win there, but so let's talk about some issues though, because there's been plenty to report about this year. Some things that you could draw from, I imagine, or you got some experience with. Look, we're in the middle of a very busy election season. I mentioned that at the start, that early voting starts next week on Tuesday, February 20th. For people to know, main election day, there's about 2 weeks of early voting, and then main election day is Tuesday, March 5th. We're in a presidential year, so it's not just about what's happening at the state level, but there's some really active primaries, particularly on the Republican side, because of some things that happened last year, right? We had a legislative session. We had some things that didn't get passed, like school choice. We had an impeachment trial and vote in the House and in the Senate. So you've got some different moving parts in this election season. And, I think that, with that, a lot of that being your focus, plenty to write about. So here's how I see it, right? You got Governor Abbott is out there because his concern about the school choice issue, right? That he's been involved in some elections and, even going against some incumbents. You've got the lieutenant governor primarily focusing on the Senate. There's not really a lot of races that are up. There's one up in North Texas where there's a primary challenge, but he's also sort of, getting involved in maybe some House races. And I mean, it appears or it looks like he's showing some support of David Covey against the sitting Speaker of the House, right? I mean, talk to me about some of these, and then you've got, of course, Paxton that is supporting people that are running against people that voted for impeachment. And there were a lot of them. Talk to me about how you see all these different things playing out or the different lines. Sometimes they're all on the same page, but it's kind of, I don't know that we've seen this before.
I was going to ask you the very same question, Jonathan. Honestly, it's like I'm just every day I'm absolutely amazed by what is going on the Republican side of the aisle. And frankly, I got to tell you, I know people will have a completely different perception of this than I do, but I frankly think that all this warring, and while I get it and I understand it, been there, done that, this public warring that's going on in the Republican Party at the state level is very dangerous. I'm very worried about it. It's one thing to disagree and to work behind the scenes and whatever you want to do. It's another thing when you make it as public as it is. Even though everybody thinks that the state has always been a Republican state, it has not been.
It's barely been a Republican state.
That's right.
Am I right?
That's
2003 was the first time we elected a Republican Speaker of the House? I mean,
Right.
that was just 20 years ago.
That's correct. And everybody thinks, oh, it's never going to happen. And it's like, oh, yes, it is. And frankly, my take, which will bring a lot of guffaws from a lot of people.
Stir it up, Konni.
Is that all of this public and, I want to say a word, but I'm not going to say it, something show that's going on the Republican side is not good. And I think, frankly, that's what's going to take us down if we don't get our act together. And right now, obviously, I'm speaking as a Republican. Like I said,
Sure.
I am a conservative Republican. And even though I own the Texan and they very much are, a report from a perspective of just reporting the news.
Well, I mean, you might even say, though, business is good. There's plenty for you to write about.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I mean, maybe you're not always happy about that, but I'm just saying it's, for the average person trying to follow these lines. We're talking with Konni Burton, former state senator from Tarrant County, North Texas area, the CEO of The Texan. You can find this news resource, TheTexan.news, online. A lot for people to figure out, well, who should I be voting for, right? What's the issue? Right. And is it really about the issue or is it really about somebody's personality? What are some principles? There's a resource we have, freevotersguide.com, where it's a spectrum people can look at and figure it out without telling people who to vote for. But there's been a lot of activity. I'm hoping that results in more people coming out and getting engaged and not being discouraged, because I know that's probably part of your concern, with a lot of that infighting. And, not to take for granted, our state and sort of some of the gains or things that have happened that have reflected our values. I want to mention, too, before we run out of time, just a nice compliment to your team. Not just about writing articles. You got a podcast and probably some other things I'm not aware of. Y'all did an event last session, but, this podcast by Michelle Slaughter, and I forget the member of your team that did that, was
Matt Stringer.
Yeah, it was strong because, look, and I'm a lawyer, and this was about the Court of Criminal Appeals opinion about an election issue related to the Attorney General's power. A lot of people have probably heard it, but just from stepping back and going, let me listen to this and see, it was very deep, it was long, there was a lot of detail, maybe some non-lawyer types wouldn't enjoy it, but I appreciated that this is an issue that needed that kind of discussion so people had a little bit more information to chew on. Any particular feedback you guys have gotten on that one as an example?
Well, honestly,
I thought it was great work.
That's why I think, are so good at what we do, and not we so much as the team is because they truly are like, okay, what is going on here? This is
Yeah.
what we're hearing. Is this true? Let me go out, let me dig some here, and so that's exactly what happened in that situation.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things being said about that opinion, which by the way was a majority opinion. I think it was what,
It
eight
was
to
8 to
one.
1. It was, yeah.
Right. It was a majority opinion, and yet there's a lot of people out there balking about it. And yet, it's like, okay, do you really know? We didn't know, I mean, these are things that are not out there in front of everyday Texans normally, right? These Supreme Court opinions. And so Matt Stringer said, he wanted to look into this and talk with Judge Slaughter, and had a great conversation with her, and it helped explain to not only me but everybody what exactly was going on. Everyone can agree or disagree or on it, but boy, does she lay out a case
Yeah,
for
but as a
the
result of
opinion.
it, the average person has more information. And sure, it's Michelle Slaughter, so she's going to kind of say this is my opinion or this is my view. But I do think she tried to walk a line to say, listen, this is how this process worked. There was a lot of detail, a lot of background, and mostly it was really her talking and Matt sort of just setting up with a couple of questions. And he did a really good job of that. But the bigger thing here I saw was this was a relevant topic, right? That is a part of what's going on in this current election cycle. And so what a valuable piece of information for people to look at. And I think people have probably seen a lot of what the Attorney General's seen. He's been on Tucker, he's had his different platforms. And so to allow people, okay, I want to listen to this and on an issue that probably most people wouldn't think, let me read a Court of Criminal Appeals opinion and listen to a podcast on it. So I just thought the timing and the instinct to know, hey, let's put something together on this. And to your point, people decide one way or another. At least they've got more information to draw from.
Right.
And it's not Michelle Slaughter getting beat up by the liberal media and throwing all kinds of, questions at her that are taking her in different direction. And so anyway, we're about to run out of time, but so I see a lot of those things from my vantage point. Maybe the average person doesn't. So I see the Texan continuing to really add more value to the space that a lot of us are in. So I'm glad y'all are in it. That doesn't mean that, I don't look at all the different articles that y'all put out there, but I know y'all cover some of our stuff. And even if y'all don't, I know I look at the professionalism of it, and I look at the relevance, and I look at the hard work trying to get around the state, and getting to some articles that the Dallas Morning News they wouldn't even cover, right? And so you wouldn't have even heard about these issues if the Texan didn't exist. And I think we're going to see more of that. All right, we got such a great discussion. I'm just about out of time, so I don't want to be rude and cut you short, but I do want to end on the new grandbaby. Okay, we're a pro-life group and show. Tell us about the new grandbaby before we close out.
So we have a second granddaughter. Her name is Elise. Claire is our first granddaughter, and she's 3, a little over 3, and Elise was born at the very end of December, and we could not be happier. They're adorable. Claire is being a big sister, and Elise is just being a sweet little baby, and we couldn't be happier. So thank you for the shout out, for me being able to shout out for my granddaughters.
Absolutely. No, look, I mean, we're through and through. We got a new great website too called Love Them Both, where a lot of the focus is on being pro-life is loving the mother and loving the child together. Some great resources for women and so on, but always want to get those shout outs in there. And so listen, I know you got a lot of work to do, busy season for you and many of us. Thank you for taking time today. And we're so glad that we had Konni Burton as our guest today on the Texas Values Report. Thanks, Konni.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, I don't have a lot of time left. Let me do this. Early voting starts next week, Tuesday, February 20th. 2 weeks of early voting, main election day, March 5th. So check out our website. Check out the website we have for voting to freevotersguide.com. I'm going to be going around the state talking about what churches can do. And I think I'm probably way over time because my timer's not working in here. But I'm going to conclude in just a minute. freevotersguide.com. You want to check out that website to get a lot of great voting information. Some of the many reasons why you should consider supporting us. I know it's February. We need donations every single month, not just in December. So go to txvalues.org, make that tax-deductible donation today. And that's how together we'll protect faith, family, and freedom in Texas. And we'll talk to you next week on the Texas Values Report.